everyone, Ben here, and welcome to another election prediction, and this one is Mark Cuban versus Donald Trump. Just before I get into it, I do want to say a little heads up. On Monday, I'm probably going to release the election night for Kanye West versus Donald Trump. Again, that's more just because I think it's a funny matchup, and I think it would be at least entertaining if it ever were to happen, but I really don't think that's going to happen, for a myriad of reasons. But yeah, this would not be, that would not be something that, was. It's just because I want to take a little break from, some of the more serious elections. And I want to talk a little bit about why I gave Dwayne Johnson such a high chance. And that's because even though he has no political experience whatsoever and doesn't even have real business experience, I think he could easily be considered a serious candidate because he seems like a good person, and he's kind of avoided a lot of controversy, and when he does speak about whatever subject he wants to speak about, he at least seems intelligent. So I think that could give him some serious chances, and especially if, Democrats wanted to appeal to moderates, considering that it's a plausible suspicion that The Rock is a bit more conservative leaning, as in, Republican leaning, but who knows, to be quite honest with you. He kind of avoids a lot of political stances. So he's kind of got that clean image where, he can really mold himself to whatever he wants to be. Anyway, on to the Mark Cuban prediction. And I think this would be kind of like a 48% chance for Cuban to 52 for Trump, and that's mainly just because of incumbency, and also I don't think Mark Cuban is going to play well in certain areas that are crucial, for a lot of reasons. From what I can gather, Mark Cuban isn't really a progressive. He's not a populist either. His stance on trade seems to be beneficial. As in, he thinks trade is beneficial in the short run, or not the long run. Sorry, I'm kind of rambling there, but he tends to think that trade is beneficial, which, of course, the issue is a lot more nuanced than that. But I don't think that's going to play well in the Rust Belt. It could, don't get me wrong, it could. But, it's really dependent on how, the economy performs, as well as whether or not the people care about Trump's scandals. Which, considering there is a new quote-unquote scandal every single week for this administration, I don't think that's going to be an issue, to be honest. It wasn't an issue during the campaign when he didn't have the incumbency advantage, and now that he has that advantage, I'm skeptical that people are going to even bat an eyelid. So I'm going to kind of go through each and every state. Texas, I'm going to put that in the likely column. I do think Mark Cuban being from Texas will help him there, but not enough to make the state, even semi-competitive. It'll be like a 9-10 point margin of victory for Trump, and that'll be enough to secure the Lone Star State and kind of negate some of the advantage that Cuban would start with the solid blue states. I think the next state I kind of want to talk about is Georgia. It is moving towards the Democrats, but I don't think it's fast enough for the 2020 election. And also, I don't think Cuban is going to play well in Georgia, considering a lot of things. I think that's still going to be a 6 to 7, maybe 8 point victory for Trump. I think Iowa is becoming very much a red state. Last year, it was just under a 10-point margin for Trump. I think he's going to expand those margins in 2020. And I think Ohio also is going to be around a 7 or 8 point advantage for Trump. I think Ohio is slowly switching into becoming just a red state. Like a lot of this region, it's been shifting red for years, and 2016 was the first year that it flipped, but that could have just been because of the dynamics. But 2020 would be a year that I would have expected it to flip anyway, at least some of the Rust Belt. But I'll get to that in a second. Let's cover the Southwest. Arizona is moving more Democrat. I don't think that's a secret. I don't think that's comes as a surprise to anyone. I think Trump will win the state by about 2 to 3% again, maybe 4 or 5 if he performs extremely well. But I don't think it's going to be above a 5 point margin of victory. Nevada, I think it's safe to say that Nevada is becoming a blue state not quickly, but it would take a strong Republican campaign or a very weak Democrat one in order to lose Nevada. I just don't think it's I think the Democrat apparatus in Nevada is too much to overcome, at least in a competitive election. Colorado, that could be a 5 or 6 point margin of victory, maybe 7. But Colorado is essentially gone for the Republicans. Again, it would take a very strong Republican candidate in order to win the state. Moving on, North Carolina, I'm going to say that it continues to vote with the winner of the election. It's a turnout state. There was a very good article on 538 talking about how some states have different types of populations. Like Georgia, for example, has more conservatives than Democrats, but there aren't a lot of swing voters in Georgia. So it's going to take a long time for the state to become competitive. In North Carolina, both Republicans and Democrats have about the same number of registered voters, and there are very, very few swing voters in the state. Meaning voters who are willing, who flip between candidates. But a state like Rhode Island, which is solidly Democrat, has a ton of swing voters. Anyway, so we're going to go to Virginia now. And Virginia is a state that I'm not comfortable calling, definitively for one candidate or the other in most instances, because I think it's going to be dependent on who wins the governor's race this year. If Ralph Northam wins, it really does signify the state is a blue state. If Ed Gillespie wins, which I have a sneaking suspicion that he will, he tends to outperform his polls by a decent margin, and I just don't think Ralph Northam's ad campaign or platform are very good, and Gillespie has he's been doing well in the debates, and his ads they're effective. I'm going to say that right away. Is to swing voters, I think they're going to be extremely effective. But I think if the governor's race goes to Gillespie, I think it's a true swing state, and the Republicans still have a chance to win the state. If the state goes to Northam, I think it's too much of a blue state to go red at that point. So I'm going to leave Virginia's leans blue, but that could all change. New Hampshire, I think Trump's comments about, the heroin epidemic are really going to hurt him. In Maine, I think he could easily pull this off because they really do like him in the rural district and the second congressional district. I think he may be able to flip some of the first, the Portland area, and but not the entire district. There's no way he's going to win all 4 districts. But I think he'll perform well enough to flip the statewide vote, the at-large vote. So now we've got, of course, the 4 Rust Belt states and Florida. Trump could win with just the Rust Belt. He only needs 3 of 4, I think. Let me do some. Okay. If you were to lose Pennsylvania, then he would need to win Florida. But I'm going to kind of go through this one by one. I'm going to give him. Florida's a tough one. Because I think Cuban could play extremely well in some areas. I think Cuban could play extremely well in some areas. I'm going to leave Florida to be the last one. Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin is slowly evolving into a red-leaning swing state. It's been shifting to the right for years, and Scott Walker has won 3 statewide elections already, and Ron Johnson, their Republican senator, has won has won his election over Russ Feingold twice. And I just don't see Democrats competing, at least at the presidential level. I do see Tammy Baldwin maintaining her seat for a little while, at least 1 more term, maybe 2, depending on what she does in 2020. Because I think she could be a candidate that would have a chance, I think. And I'll get to that when I cover the Democrat primary, because I have a video idea for that already. But I'm going to lean this one to Trump just because I think the population is shifting enough to where it is a Trump state, and maybe even just a Republican state. Pennsylvania. That's the other state that went to Trump by a similar margin. Both went by a little under 1%. And I think Trump's going to expand his margin in Wisconsin, and I think he could maintain a similar margin in Pennsylvania. And the reason I say that is because, again, the whole region has been moving towards Trump. And not just Trump, but towards the Republicans in general. 10 years ago, 2008, it was ludicrous to consider a Republican winning these states. But now it's, they're competing extremely well at all levels, and Democrats seem to be abandoning the platform that kept this area as solid blue as it was. Because they're no longer focusing on the union worker, the working class in this region. They're focusing on, the Southwest and the South and the growing minority populations. They're focusing on progressive politics that appeal extremely well in the coastal areas in New England, in Northern Virginia, and all the big cities. But they're not focusing on small town America, which is how you win the upper Midwest and the Rust Belt. In addition, Hillary ran up, she got the same kind of turnout she needed in Pennsylvania in the Philly area of about, a 450,000 vote lead in the Philly area, and Trump still overcame that. Every single place was like, well, if she wins Philly by 450,000, Trump's not going to win the state, and yet he still did. So I'm going to lean Pennsylvania to Trump because of that. Now, this is where it gets harder to predict. Again, the upper Midwest has been trending Republican for years. I think Michigan was a fluke in 2016, but I'm not sure about 2020. Depends on who wins the governor's race next year, as well as the Senate race next year. If the Democrats win both, I think Michigan will be Democrat. If Republicans pick off one, I think it could very easily be a Republican state and a Republican hold in 2020. That said, this state is extremely close. I said a while ago, back when I was predicting for 2016, I said it was going to be the closest state in 2016, and that it's going to be closer than anyone ever would have imagined. I was slightly wrong. It was definitely closer than anyone would have ever imagined. That's for sure. But New Hampshire was the closest state, both percentage-wise and vote total-wise. Michigan, I think it wound up being like just under 12,000 votes total across the entire state. And that's 0.2%. It was extremely close. And I'm going to, this is a tough one. I'm going to make a call on this. I think a decent Trump presidency plus the fact that I don't think Mark Cuban plays well to the upper Midwest, I think Trump can hold Michigan. I think Trump could hold Michigan. And I've kind of talked about the upper Midwest. I think the states go from more Republican to more Democrat in this order: Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Minnesota. I think Minnesota will stay blue, but it's going to be extremely, extremely close. I'm talking they might not call it for a week. It'll be maybe 0.5%. Florida. We come back to you. Your votes don't matter this time, but you're also going to be an interesting state. Now, Trump won here by about 2%, which that indicates that if he's winning Pennsylvania, he should win Florida. But I think Cuban might do very well in this state for a few reasons. It's got a lot of swing voters, but also I think that his moderate tone on a lot of issues could help him out, as well as a little bit of his Hispanic appeal, because he actually has a lot of that for other reasons than the fact that, his last name is Cuban, but he might improve in the I-4 corridor, and he could easily improve in some of the suburbs of Miami that Clinton lost. That would be Naples and Montgomery County. Except Montgomery County is more rural because of the Everglades. It's complicated. And he may improve somewhat slightly in the Panhandle. I'm not sure it'll be enough. He could even do a little bit better in Jacksonville, which is one of the weird Republican cities that exist. Don't ask me. Just don't ask me. Because Jacksonville has tended to vote red. But this state is definitely a too close to call state. It could be, again, they won't call it till a couple of days after the election. I'm going to give it to Trump. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt due to incumbency. But it is definitely a state Mark Cuban could win, even in the event that he loses the upper Midwest. But again, I'm going to give it to Trump, mainly due to the fact that he's the incumbent. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I hope I explained my decisions on certain states a little bit better than I have in the past.